Ever since the game was first launched, there have been a subsection of players who have consistently pushed its physics engine to the limits. First starting with simple player creations such as pulleys, levers, or the wheel. Such inventions would go on to define the game so much that the developers will create an entire class around bending these game systems to a player's will. This would be the birth of the engineer class, a role that would be highly popular with certain sections of the player base who wanted to shape the world around them and create in-game items once thought impossible. The Roman Empire faction, which dominated the Mediterranean server for so many years, did so in no small part from the incredible tenacity of early engineer players. In fact, many of these engineer mains were so talented that even players 1,000 years later would marvel at what they had built and wonder how they'd ever recreate such structures. In the current meta, any bridge, toaster, or light bulb only exists because an engineer main hyped up on stimulants spent hundreds of hours tirelessly designing them. And as any engineer main will tell you, hundreds more hours were spent to make sure that low intelligence builds couldn't accidentally find a way to kill themselves with their creation. Due to basically designing the entire world, engineers have more roles than we could possibly cover, but engineers typically spec into 4 main subclasses. The first is the chemical engineer. These guys will either be spending months on end trying to find a way to make a Lay's potato chip taste like a hot dog, or they'll be working in the fossil fuel industry, making more money than they could ever hope to spend. Chemical engineers aren't as enthusiastic about ethics as their counterparts, and if the player base pointed to any major environmental disaster over the last few decades, it was probably because a chemical engineer forgot to carry the one. The easiest part of a chemical engineer's job is to design something to work. The hard part is to make it work without causing untold horrors on the people expected to use them. The main problem with speccing into a chemical engineer is that the developers seem to have a grudge against this subclass. This is likely because chemical engineers can't seem to go a single major patch without breaking the game in some capacity, and this causes an absolute headache for the balanced team. DPS chemical engineering builds had to be banged completely, as while most other players were stuck using standard ballistic weapons, these absolute clowns would come out with mustard gas, super soakers filled with acid, and melee weapons that would make Geiger counters lose their shit. This isn't even to mention how many times they've broken the athletics meta with various performance enhancers. You give these guys a year, a large enough Icelandic man, and a sizable nerf to the ethics system, and they'll give you a superhuman who'll be able to rip a car apart and eat it piece by piece. Many current records still stand to this day, in part because they were obtained before these exploits were patched out. Next up we have civil engineers. These are the most noticeable of the bunch, because if a bridge falls over, or an entire road looks like it was a misinput, these are the ones you get to blame. Civil engineers have one of the most unique playstyles, unlocking limited city building mechanics which can shape the very game space itself. Although this might seem like a tempting subclass, many civil engineers quickly become dissatisfied with the role, as their well-constructed year-long plans quickly evaporate after one player spams the report button on the project. The endgame goal of any civil engineer is to create a perfect utopia where noise levels are minimized, pollution is all but gone, and players themselves have transcended the need for cars, an item that currently defines the transportation meta. Viewers who want to make a civil engineer cry can simply show them a map of any Texan city and watch as the life leaves their eyes when they discover that 40% of the space is dedicated to car parks. Civil engineers dream of a city where all amenities are within a 5-minute walk, trees are perfectly spaced to offer a 100% nature uptime bonus, and where trains are tantamount to teleportation. At best, however, most civil engineers will have to settle with the gentrification skill, which lets them make a bastardized version of this vision, but only for wealthy members of the player base. As we all know, a player's server can drastically affect all kinds of variables about their playstyle. And this is most apparent when using the internet feature. Lucky for us, Today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN, can unlock more features than ever before. Surfshark isn't just useful for keeping your personal data to yourself, but it can also prevent trackers, malware, and phishing attempts, random events which can drain a player's bank account to zero. Players should think of Surfshark as their trusty online companion that never lets you down and cranks up your stealth stat higher than ever before.
Must be my imagination.
As an added bonus, Surfshark is also able to completely mitigate location requirements for watching media online. This means that with the simple push of a button, users can set their location to anywhere they like and enjoy all the benefits that come with being online in another country. Server hopping to watch your favorite shows is now a thing of the past. To make Surfshark even better, the devs are currently running a Black Friday deal, which means by using our code on screen, viewers can score up to 6 months for free. The people at Surfshark are so confident in their user experience that if you decide to back out in the first 30 days, they'll straight up give you a full refund for any reason at all. Surfshark VPN, it's cheaper than the other ones. The third main subclass are mechanical engineers. Many civil engineers initially try their hand in this subclass, but are quickly annoyed when they discover that their projects are expected to move. Unlike civil engineers, their mechanical counterparts absolutely love the current car-based meta, and probably would have been a mechanic if they didn't have such a fondness for air conditioning. With this in mind, mechanical engineers are usually the most practical in their class, even if most of their job is just simulating shit for the 800th time this month. Mechanical engineers are often considered to be enigmas among their peers, seemingly doing the least, but being the most productive.
Good morning, sir.
And showing flashes of genius 1 minute, while looking like the missing link the next. The 2 best tips for when a player encounters a mechanical engineer is keep your palm flat when you go to feed them, and when you can see light behind their eyes, let them cook. Mechanical engineers will dream of hitting high level skills which can let them work with nanotech or build towering mechs that fall from orbit, but more than likely, they'll be tasked with how to make a washing machine 2 decibels quieter with a budget of $3.17. Our final main subclass is the electrical engineer, which the developers describe as an evolution of the hermit wizard build. They say that there are 2 types of electrical engineers, the ones that can function in a modern society, and the ones that are good at their job. Electrical engineer players are the least likely to touch grass, most likely to become a full-on supervillain, and are rumored to see the world through Batman detective vision. These guys might as well say their job is a magician, because not even the other engineer subclasses know how the fuck anything they design is supposed to work. The end game of every electrical engineer is to successfully create a functional Iron Man suit, and you won't be able to find a single one of them who hasn't put in some serious thought about how they might make that happen. Electrical engineers watching right now will probably be muttering something about a compact power source or a way to mitigate blunt force trauma. These are of course only the 4 main subclasses for the engineer, but many others are still playable by flexing into other classes. Software engineers are usually lumped in with the tech class, mining engineers spend most of their time away from civilization, and industrial engineers are usually considered to be businessmen that got lost on their way to the office. Players looking for a more DPS oriented build might also be interested in the combat engineer, but this will lock you into the military quest line, which is very different from the usual engineer playstyle. Combat engineers are, however, given access to the most interesting skill tree, which usually boils down to blowing something up if it's in the way, or using 20 meters of duct tape if you want it to stay in place. For which stats you should be choosing, engineer mains will want to invest heavily in intelligence as a base requirement, but also in creativity, as most of what you'll be doing is fixing problems in the cheapest way possible. A good engineer will be so good at solving problems that the average person wouldn't have even considered that they're a single decimal point away from a Babylon-sized catastrophic failure. Charisma, as always, is considered a nice bonus to bypass a lot of client-based roadblocks, but this is usually best for a team leader role, so everyone else can keep their builds more specialized. Engineer players should also keep in mind that their server will heavily influence the types of projects they'll be able to build and the red tape intensity that will come from each project. For example, democratic servers will tend to offer a lot more trivial work from mission boards, such as maintaining basic infrastructure and surveying a particular intersection, to make it 3% more efficient. Players who make their way into authoritarian servers, however, will often be able to tackle some of their dream projects, like invent new and exciting ways to poison dissidents in exile, or build towering vanity projects for the glory of the great leader. For civil engineers especially, this can be the opportunity of a lifetime, as leaders of these nations could simply ask for an entire new capital to be built from scratch, which would be free from the last 200 years of haphazard urban planning. After 5 years, and a heavy reliance on the slavery skill tree, an engineer main will have been able to transform a shitty oppressive country into a shitty oppressive country with a brand new stadium. Engineers are ranked quite highly in the current intelligence heavy meta, with high money generation, decent player satisfaction, and crazy levels of build flexibility. Unfortunately, however, the red tape and cost requirements of many of the bigger engineering projects are far too high, without the help of political mains distributing the necessary resources. This often means that engineers very rarely get to deliver their ideal vision for a project, and are usually left doing what's most cost effective. With business and politics mains taking up the S tier, engineers will have to settle for a tier 4 now, as even though they have the will to transform the world, they lack the tools to make it happen. If you're an engineer main, feel free to describe your experience or any tips down below, and viewers who want to see guides on other classes can let us know. Until next time, have fun and embrace the bullshit.